Imagine a 17-year-old Jamaican boy stands at the entrance of the most prestigious debate hall in New England. His heart pounds like thunder against his ribs. Behind those doors, 200 of the wealthiest, most privileged students in America are waiting to watch him fail. They think they know how this story ends. They think they've already written his defeat. But what they don't know, what no one in that room knows, is that in the next 23 minutes, this boy they've mocked, ridiculed, and underestimated for 3 years is about to deliver the most powerful speech of his life. A speech so profound, so authentically devastating, that will silence every laugh, humble every bully, and transform not just his life, but the lives of thousands of others who will hear it. The door handle feels cold in his sweaty palm. Through the frosted glass, he can see shadows moving, hear the low rumble of conversation punctuated by cruel laughter. His name, Dwayne Campbell, is already being whispered like a punchline. The Jamaican kid actually showed up. Someone snickers. This is going to be embarrassing. Another voice chimes in, but Dwayne takes a deep breath, straightens a second-hand blazer, and thinks about his grandmother's words from 3,000 miles away. Baby, when dem throw stones at you, build a castle. He opens the door. What happens next will shock everyone in that room, including Dwayne himself. But to understand the magnitude of this moment, we need to go back to where it all began. Back to the day a scared 13-year-old boy from Kingston, Jamaica stepped off a plane into a world that would test every fiber of his being. September 15th, 2019. Logan International Airport, Boston. Dwayne Campbell clutches his mother's hand as they walk to the terminal. There are 2 battered suitcases trailing behind them. At 13, he's tall for his age, all knees and elbows, with kind eyes that haven't yet learned to guard themselves against cruelty. His mother, Patricia, works 3 jobs back in Kingston just to afford this moment. She's managed to secure a full scholarship for Dwayne at Whitmore Academy, one of the most elite preparatory schools in New England. A school where tuition costs more than most Jamaican families see in 5 years. Remember what we practiced, Dwayne, Patricia whispers as they wait for their ride. Speak clearly. Show them how brilliant you are. But Dwayne's stomach churns with more than just airplane food. He's heard the stories. He knows what he's walking into. 3 days later, Whitmore Academy's campus sprawls before him like something from a movie. Gothic stone buildings, perfectly manicured lawns, and teenagers who look like they stepped out of fashion magazines. Everyone seems to know exactly where they belong. Everyone except Dwayne. His first class is Advanced English Literature. He walks in, and the conversation stops. Not gradually, instantly, like someone hit a pause button on life itself. 17 pairs of eyes scan him from head to toe, taking inventory. The discount uniform that doesn't quite fit, the knockoff backpack, the nervous energy radiating from every pore. You must be the scholarship kid, says Madison Fairfield, her voice dripping with the kind of entitlement that money can't buy. It has to be inherited. From Jamaica, right? How exotic. The way she says exotic makes it sound like a disease. Dwayne nods, trying to smile. Yes, Mon, yes, I am from Jamaica. The slip happens so fast he doesn't catch it. But they do. Every single one of them catches it. A ripple of smirks spreads across the room like wildfire. Did he just say Mon? Whispers Bradley Ashworth III, whose great-grandfather has a wing of the library named after him. This is going to be entertaining. Mrs. Henderson, the teacher, clears her throat. Please take a seat, Dwayne. We were just discussing Shakespearean sonnets. Dwayne finds an empty desk in the middle of the room. Enemy territory. As he sits, he can feel their stares like physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. Now, who can tell me about the structure of a Petrarchan sonnet? Mrs. Henderson asks. Dwayne's hand shoots up. Back in Kingston, he devoured books like oxygen. He knows this material better than he knows his own reflection. Mrs. Henderson looks surprised but nods. Yes, Dwayne. A Petrarchan sonnet has 14 lines divided into an octave and a sestet. The octave presents a problem or question, typically within the babble rhyme scheme, while the sestet provides a resolution or answer, usually following decti or cd. Wow! Bradley interrupts, his voice laden with mock amazement. He can read. Who taught you? The parrot at the resort? The classroom erupts in laughter. Even some students who seem decent moments before can't help but chuckle. Dwayne's face burns with shame. The words he knew so confidently seconds ago evaporate from his mind like morning mist. But this is just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the harassment becomes systematic. Relentless. They mock his accent when he speaks in class, imitating him in exaggerated patois. Me want to learn the Shakespeare, Mon. They leave fake vacation brochures for Jamaica on his desk with notes like missing home. They ask him if he knows Bob Marley personally, if he smokes weed, if his family lives in a hut. Every day, Dwayne feels himself shrinking. The confident boy who used to debate adults in his neighborhood, who won every academic competition in Kingston, who dreamed of becoming a lawyer, that boy is disappearing. He starts sitting alone at lunch, headphones in, trying to make himself invisible. He stops raising his hand in class, even when he knows the answers, especially when he knows the answers, because being right while being different is apparently a crime punishable by social exile. At night, in his tiny dorm room, he calls his mother on a cheap phone card that gives him exactly 12 minutes. "Mama, I don't think I can do this," he whispers one Thursday evening, tears he refuses to shed during the day finally breaking free. "Baby," Patricia's voice crackles through the static, 3,000 miles of love trying to bridge an impossible distance. "You think your ancestors had it easy? You think they gave up when things got hard? But, Mama, they hate me here. They hate everything about me. Listen to me, Dwayne Campbell. You are not there to make friends. You are there to show them that a boy from Trench Town can be anything he wants to be. You are carrying all of us with you. You understand? All of us. But understanding and surviving are two different things. And Dwayne is barely surviving. His grades remain perfect. He's too afraid of losing his scholarship to let them slip. But his spirit is being systematically dismantled. He's becoming a ghost of his own life, present but not really there. The worst part, some of his teachers start to pity him. Mrs. Henderson begins speaking slower when she addresses him, as if his accent indicates a learning disability. Mr. Peterson, the history teacher, always looks at him with these sad, sympathetic eyes that somehow feel worse than the student's cruelty. He doesn't want their pity. He doesn't want their cruelty. He just wants to be seen as human. Then comes the day that changes everything. October 15th, 2021, 2 years into his Whitmore experience. Dwayne, now 15 and somehow even more isolated than before, overhears a conversation that will alter the trajectory of his entire life. He's returning books to the library after hours, using his student worker privileges to avoid the crowded halls. As he approaches the main study area, he hears familiar voices from behind the towering philosophy section. Bradley Ashworth's voice, unmistakable in his entitled drawl. "I'm telling you, it's perfect. The debate championship is in 3 months. If we nominate the Jamaican kid as our representative, he'll crash and burn in front of everyone. The whole school will see that scholarship students don't belong here." Madison's laughter tinkles like broken crystal. "Oh my God, Bradley, that's diabolical. But what if he actually refuses?" "He won't," comes another voice, Carson Webb, whose father sits on the school board. His pride won't let him. Plus, he's too naive to see it coming. The topic this year is the role of cultural identity in modern society. Bradley continues. Can you imagine? They'll eat him alive when he tries to defend whatever it is his people believe in. More laughter. Cruel, calculating laughter that echoes through the library stacks like a death sentence. Dwayne stands frozen behind a shelf of Dickens novels, his hands trembling as he grips Great Expectations. The irony is not lost on him. In this moment, Dwayne faces a choice that will define not just his time at Whitmore, but his entire future. He can pretend he never heard this conversation, continue flying under the radar, graduate quietly, and disappear into the safety of mediocrity. Or he can walk into their trap with his eyes wide open. He can step onto that stage they're preparing for his humiliation and show them exactly what a boy from Jamaica is capable of. The question is, does he have the courage to bet everything on himself? What Dwayne decides in this moment will shock you, because sometimes the greatest victories come from walking straight into the fire that's meant to destroy you. Before we continue this incredible journey, I need to ask you something. If this story is moving you, if you're feeling emotion and want to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button. I know, you're thinking, I'll do it later. But here's the thing. Subscribing is completely free, and it's the only way stories like this one reach people who need them most. Don't just watch and walk away. Be part of something bigger. And for those of you who crave even deeper, more personal stories, the ones I can't always share publicly, join our exclusive newsletter family. The link is in the description. These are the stories that don't make it to YouTube, the raw, unfiltered accounts that will change how you see the world. Now, are you ready to see what Dwayne does next? Because what happens next 3 will leave you speechless. The next morning arrives like a storm waiting to break. Dwayne sits in his dorm room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he overheard. His roommate, Kevin, has already left for his morning rowing practice. One of those effortlessly privileged kids who's never had to question whether he belongs anywhere. At 7:47 a.m., Dwayne makes a decision that will either destroy him or transform him forever. He's going to walk straight into their trap. The morning assembly buzzes with its usual energy. 800 students file into Whitmore's Grand Auditorium, a cathedral of marble and mahogany that screams old money and older traditions. The walls are lined with portraits of distinguished alumni, senators, CEOs, Supreme Court justices. All white, all male, all looking down with the serene confidence of people who never had to prove they deserved to breathe the same air as everyone else. Headmaster Richardson takes the podium, his silver hair catching the morning light, streaming through stained glass windows that probably cost more than most people's houses. Good morning, Whitmore family. His voice booms across the auditorium. As you know, our annual debate championship is approaching. This year's topic, the role of cultural identity in modern society, promises to be particularly engaging. Dwayne feels his pulse quicken. In the row ahead of him, he can see Bradley's shoulders tense with anticipation. Traditionally, our debate captain selects our school representative. Bradley, would you like to make your announcement? Bradley stands, turned to face the student body with a smile that could cut glass. His eyes scan the crowd until they land on Dwayne. And for just a moment, Dwayne sees something flicker there. Surprise? Fear? Because Dwayne is smiling back. Not the nervous, apologetic smile he's worn for 2 years. This is something different. Something that makes Bradley hesitate for just a fraction of a second before recovering. Thank you, Headmaster Richardson. Bradley's voice carries that practiced confidence of someone who's never faced real consequences. After careful consideration, I'm excited to nominate someone who I believe truly embodies the diverse spirit of our modern Whitmore community. The auditorium falls silent. Everyone knows what's coming, but no one can quite believe it's actually happening. I nominate Dwayne Campbell to represent Whitmore Academy. The silence that follows is deafening. 800 students processing the same thought simultaneously. This is either the cruelest joke in Whitmore history, or Bradley has lost his mind. Dwayne stands slowly, every eye in the auditorium tracking his movement. He can feel their stares like physical weight, can practically hear the collective intake of breath as they wait for him to crumble, to make excuses, to decline and scurry back to his seat. Instead, he walks in front of the auditorium with the steady gait of someone who has nothing left to lose. You see, here's what Bradley and his friends didn't understand about Dwayne Campbell. They thought 2 years of humiliation had broken him. They thought they'd successfully convinced him that he was less than, other than, not worthy of sharing their rarefied air. What they didn't realize was that every cruel comment, every mocking laugh, every dismissive glance had been building something inside him, not breaking him down, but forging him. Like steel in a furnace, the pressure wasn't destroying him. It was making him unbreakable. I accept. Dwayne's voice rings clear across the silent auditorium. The words hang in the air like a challenge thrown down at the feet of gods. Bradley's smile falters for just a moment before snapping back into place. Wonderful. I'm sure you'll do your best. The condescension drips from every word. Around the auditorium, students exchange glances. Some shake their heads in pity. Others pull out their phones, already composing messages about the spectacle they're about to witness. But in the third row, a quiet girl named Sarah Chun, one of only 12 Asian students in the entire school, leans forward slightly. Something in Dwayne's voice and his posture makes her pay attention in a way she hasn't before. In the faculty section, Ms. Rodriguez, the only Latina teacher at Whitmore, finds herself holding her breath. She's been watching Dwayne for 2 years, has seen his brilliant mind dimmed by constant microaggressions. Part of her wants to stand up to protect him from what's coming. But another part of her, the part that remembers being the only person of color in every room she'd ever entered, whispers, maybe it's time. As the assembly disperses, Dwayne walks through halls that suddenly feel different. The whispers follow him like a swarm of locusts. Did you see his face? He actually thinks he can win. This is going to be a massacre. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. But something has shifted in the ecosystem of Whitmore Academy. For the first time in 2 years, Dwayne Campbell isn't trying to make himself invisible. He's walking with his head up, his shoulders back, and there's something in his eyes that makes even most confident bullies look away first. That afternoon, he goes to the library, not to hide, but to research. He pulls every book on debate strategy, studies videos of great orators, reads about the power of authentic voice in public speaking. But most importantly, he calls his grandmother in Kingston. "Grandmama," he says when her warm voice crackles through the phone, "I need you to tell me about our family. All of it. The parts Mama doesn't like to talk about." There's a long pause. Then, "What do you want to know, baby?" "Everything. I want to know about great-great-grandfather Samuel, who could make white folks listen when nobody else could. I want to know about Aunt Marva, who stood up to the plantation boss. I want to know about every Campbell who ever faced down impossible odds and won." His grandmother's laugh is like honey and lightning combined. "Oh, baby, you finally ready to claim your inheritance." Over the next 3 weeks, Dwayne transforms before everyone's eyes. Not into someone else, into more fully himself. He stops trying to suppress his accent, stops apologizing for taking up space, stops shrinking when people stare. He practices his speech in empty classrooms, in the mirror, walking across campus at dawn when the world is quiet enough to hear his own voice. He doesn't just prepare arguments. He prepares to stand in his truth so completely that everyone in that room will have no choice but to recognize his humanity. The other students watch this transformation with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. Bradley, especially, begins to sense that maybe, just maybe, his perfect plan isn't going to unfold exactly as he imagined. 3 days before the debate, Madison approaches Dwayne in the dining hall. "You know," she says, her voice saccharine sweet, "it's not too late to back out. Save yourself the embarrassment. No one would blame you." Dwayne looks up from his book, Marcus Garvey's speeches, and smiles. Not the nervous, people-pleasing smile she's used to, but something warm and unshakable. "Madison," he says, his Jamaican accent rich and unapologetic, "I appreciate your concern, but I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. I just didn't know it until now." She walks away confused and slightly unsettled, not understanding that she's just spoken to a young man who has finally remembered who he is. The night before the debate, Dwayne sits in his dorm room, not nervous but centered, calm in a way that only comes from absolute clarity of purpose. He thinks about his mother working 3 jobs, about his grandmother's stories, about every ancestor who faced down systems designed to crush them and chose to stand anyway. Tomorrow, he will walk into that debate hall carrying more than just his own dreams. He will carry the hopes of every kid who's ever been told they don't belong, every student who's ever been made to feel less than because of where they came from or how they speak. Bradley and his friends think they're about to watch a humiliation. What they're actually about to witness is a reckoning. February 14th, 2022. Valentine's Day. Though there's nothing romantic about the blood sport everyone expects to witness in exactly 37 minutes. The debate hall fills with energy that's part anticipation, part feeding frenzy. Students pour in like spectators at a gladiator match, phones ready to capture what they're certain will be the social media moment of the year. The complete and total destruction of Dwayne Campbell's dignity. The hall itself is intimidating. 200 plush red seats rising in tiers around a central stage where a single podium stands under harsh fluorescent lights. Behind the stage, oil paintings of Whitmore's founding fathers look down with stern disapproval, as if they're already judging the outcome. Parents have driven in from Boston, New York, even as far as Washington, D.C., to watch their children witness what many are calling the greatest mismatch in Whitmore debate history. The betting isn't on whether Dwayne will lose. It's on how quickly he'll break down crying. In the green room, really just a converted classroom behind the auditorium, Dwayne sits alone, eyes closed, breathing deeply. He's wearing the same second-hand blazer from his first day, but somehow it looks different on him now. It fits his shoulders, suits his bearing. He's grown into it, or perhaps into himself. The door opens and Ms. Rodriguez slips in, carrying a cup of tea. "Chamomile," she says simply, setting it on the table beside him. "My grandmother's recipe from El Salvador. She used to make it before she had to speak to immigration officers." Dwayne opens his eyes and looks at her, really looks. He sees something there he's never noticed before. Recognition. The look of someone who understands what it means to be the only one. To carry the weight of representation. To know that your success or failure will be used to judge everyone who looks like you. "Ms. Rodriguez," he says quietly, "why didn't you ever tell me?" "Tell you what?" "That you knew. That you understood." She sits down across from him, her professional teacher mask slipping for just a moment. "Because you had to find your own strength, Dwayne. I could support you, but I couldn't give you what you needed to discover about yourself." Through the thin walls, they can hear the crowd growing restless. Someone shouts, "Where's the Jamaican kid?" And the laughter that follows sounds like breaking glass. Dwayne stands, straightens his tie, a gift from his grandmother, sent with a note that read, "Wear our colors proudly," and walks toward the door. Dwayne, Ms. Rodriguez calls softly. He turns. Remember, you're not just speaking for yourself today. You're speaking for all of us who never got the chance. The walk from the green room to the stage feels like a mile. Every step echoes in the suddenly quiet hallway. As Dwayne approaches the back entrance to the auditorium, he can hear Bradley's voice through the door, already warming up the crowd with his opening remarks. And while I respect my opponent's unique perspective, I think we can all agree that true cultural identity comes from centuries of refined tradition, not from, well, whatever it is that develops in places that barely qualify as civilized. The laughter that erupts is ugly, hungry. These aren't just teenagers anymore. They're a mob that smells blood in the water. Dwayne puts his hand on the door handle. This is it. The moment Bradley and his friends have been orchestrating for weeks. In 30 seconds, he'll walk onto that stage, and 200 people will be watching with the expectation that he'll crumble, stutter, maybe even run. What they don't know, what they can't possibly know, is that Dwayne Campbell has spent the last 3 weeks remembering something crucial. He is not just a scholarship student from Jamaica trying to fit into their world. He is a descendant of people who survived the Middle Passage, the great-great-grandson of a man who built schools with his bare hands, the heir to a culture that has been creating beauty, wisdom, and strength out of impossible circumstances for centuries. The door swings open, and Dwayne steps onto stage. The laughter dies instantly, not gradually. It's cut off like someone severed a wire, because the young man walking to the podium doesn't look defeated or nervous or out of place. He looks like he belongs exactly where he is. His steps are measured, confident. His head is high. When he reaches the podium, he doesn't fumble with his notes or avoid eye contact. Instead, he looks out over the crowd with the steady gaze of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to share. In the third row, Sarah Chun sits up straighter. Something is different. Something has changed. Bradley, who was basking in the laughter just moments before, feels a small flutter of uncertainty in his chest. This isn't how the script was supposed to go. "Good afternoon," Dwayne begins, and his voice carries clearly to the back of the hall. No microphone needed. This is a voice that was trained in churches and town squares, a voice that learned to project truth across impossible distances. "My name is Dwayne Campbell, and I am here to speak with you about cultural identity." He pauses, and in that silence, you could hear a pin drop. 200 people lean forward slightly, as if pulled by some invisible force. Before I begin, I want to address the elephant in the room. I know what many of you are thinking. You're wondering what a Jamaican scholarship student could possibly teach you about identity. You're expecting me to stumble, to embarrass myself, to prove that I don't belong on this stage. The honesty is startling. No one expected him to acknowledge their thoughts so directly, so calmly. And you know what? A month ago, I might have agreed with you. A month ago, I was so busy trying to become someone you might accept that I forgot who I actually was. His voice grows stronger, more resonant. In the faculty section, teachers who have watched him shrink for 2 years are sitting forward, amazed. But then something happened. I remembered that I come from a place where survival itself is an act of cultural identity, where my ancestors looked at systems designed to erase them and said, "Not today, not ever." Now the uncomfortable shifting is more pronounced. This isn't going according to anyone's plan. Not Bradley's. Not even Dwayne's opponents who prepare for a timid, apologetic presentation. Bradley jumps up for his rebuttal, clearly rattled. "That's all very colorful," he begins, the word colorful dripping with condescension. But cultural identity isn't about survival stories or folk tales. It's about contributing to the advancement of civilization. It's about institutions like Whitmore that have shaped leaders for over 2 centuries. He gestures around the room, at the portraits, at the marble columns, at the physical manifestations of generational wealth and power. Some cultures build. Others. He pauses dramatically. Well, others just endure. The silence that follows is different this time. Heavier. More dangerous. Because Dwayne Campbell doesn't flinch. Doesn't look hurt or angry or defeated. Instead, he smiles. Not a bitter smile or a defensive smile, but something warm and knowing and absolutely unshakable. "Bradley," he says, and his voice carries a richness that seems to fill every corner of the vast hall. "Let me tell you about building. What happens next will be talked about at Whitmore Academy for decades. Because sometimes, when someone finally stops trying to fit into a story that was never written for them and starts telling their own story instead, the whole world has to stop and listen. Listen, I need you to pause for just a second. I know you're dying to know what Dwayne says next. Trust me, it's going to blow your mind. But if this story is hitting you in the chest the way it's supposed to, if you're feeling the weight of this moment, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Not later. Not after the story ends. Right now. Because here's the truth. Stories like this one don't reach the people who need the most unless you help them get there. That kid who's sitting alone at lunch, feeling like they don't belong? That teenager who's been told their accent is wrong or their culture is less than? They need to hear what happens next. And for those of you who are hungry for the stories I can't share publicly, the raw, unfiltered account of transformation that happened when someone finally claims their power, join our newsletter family. The link is in the description. These are the stories that will change how you see yourself and the world around you. Now, are you ready for what happens next? Because what Dwayne says next doesn't just win a debate, it started a revolution. Bradley, Dwayne says again, his voice carrying that same warm certainty. Let me tell you about building. He steps away from the podium, moving closer to the edge of the stage. No notes, no props, just a 17-year-old boy and the truth he's finally ready to own. You see this hall? These marble columns? This ceiling painted with scenes of Greek mythology. His gesture encompasses the grandeur around them. Beautiful, aren't they? Impressive. The kind of architecture that makes you feel small, makes you remember your place. Bradley shifts uncomfortably. This isn't the breakdown he orchestrated. But let me tell you what my great-great-grandfather built with nothing but his hands and his determination. After slavery ended in Jamaica, Samuel Campbell, a man who had never been allowed to learn to read, built the first school in our parish, not with marble, not with oil paintings of dead white men, with bamboo and palm fronds and the unshakable belief that his children deserved better. That school educated over 300 children before the government finally built a proper one to replace it. But here's what they couldn't replace. The lesson my great-great-grandfather taught, that when the world tells you that you don't deserve education, you build your own classroom. When they tell you that you don't deserve to be heard, you build your own platform. Dwayne's voice grows stronger, more resonant. In the audience, something is shifting. Students who came to watch a spectacle are starting to lean forward, to listen, really listen. You want to talk about cultural identity, Bradley? Let me tell you about a culture that took the scraps of languages stolen from a dozen different African nations and created new ways to speak truth. A culture that took the pain of displacement and turned it into music that the whole world moves to. A culture that looked at impossible odds and said, "Watch this." Sarah Chin finds herself holding her breath. She's never heard anyone speak like this before, with such complete ownership of their story, such refusal to apologize for existing. My grandmother used to say, "Dwayne, when life hands you lemons, you don't just make lemonade, you plant a lemon tree, start a juice business, and employ half the neighborhood." A few students actually smile at this. Real smiles, not the cruel smirks that usually follow anything Dwayne says. That's not folk wisdom, Bradley. That's survival strategy. That's innovation born from necessity. That's the kind of building that creates something from nothing instead of inheriting something from everything. Bradley tries to interject, "But surely you can't compare." "I'm not comparing." Dwayne cuts him off gently but firmly. "I'm explaining. See, for 2 years, I've been trying to fit into your idea of what cultural identity should look like. I tried to speak like you, think like you, apologize for every part of me that didn't match your template." His voice drops to something more intimate, more personal. "I was so busy trying to prove I belonged in your world that I forgot I come from a world that built itself. A world that didn't wait for permission to exist." Now Dwayne's accent grows richer, more pronounced. Instead of hiding it, he's embracing it, letting it color his words with the rhythms and music of his heritage. You want to know about cultural identity? I'll tell you. Cultural identity isn't about who had the biggest castle or the fanciest uniform. Cultural identity is about who you become when everything is stripped away. It's about what you create when you have nothing but your spirit and your community. The crowd is mesmerized. Even the teachers who thought they knew where this was going are sitting forward, caught off guard by the power emanating from the stage. My culture created reggae from the pain of colonization, created cuisine that feeds the soul from ingredients nobody else wanted, created literature that speaks truth to power in languages that weren't supposed to exist. And most importantly, my culture created people like Marcus Garvey, who told black children around the world to be proud of their heritage when the whole world told them to be ashamed. Created people like Bob Marley, who took the music of the oppressed and made it the soundtrack of liberation. Created people like Louise Bennett, who prove that dialect isn't broken English, it's perfect Jamaican. Bradley's face has gone pale. This isn't debate anymore, it's testimony. It's revolution disguised as oratory. So yes, Bradley, I come from a culture that builds. We build resilience. We build community. We build hope in places where hope shouldn't be possible. We build children who grow up to stand on stages in schools they weren't supposed to attend, and remind rooms full of people that worthiness isn't something you inherit. It's something you claim. The silence that follows isn't empty, it's full, pregnant with possibility and recognition, and the uncomfortable realization that everyone in this room has just witnessed something extraordinary. In the third row, Sarah Chun wipes tears from her eyes. In the faculty section, Ms. Rodriguez is gripping her chair so tightly her knuckles have gone white. Even some of the parents who came to watch their children witness a humiliation are sitting straighter, seeing something they didn't expect to see. But it's what happens next that will haunt this room forever. Because Dwayne Campbell, having just delivered the most powerful speech in Whitmore Academy's 150-year history, looks out over the crowd of people who have spent 2 years trying to break him and says, "And if that's not the kind of building you can respect, then maybe the problem isn't with my culture. Maybe the problem is that you've never had to build anything at all." The words hang in the air like a judgment pronounced by history itself. Because everyone in that room knows it's true. What happens in the next 60 seconds will be talked about for generations. For a moment that feels like an eternity, the entire auditorium is suspended in absolute silence. 200 people, all breathing the same air, all processing the same revelation. They had just been educated by the person they came to see humiliated. Then, from somewhere in the back of the auditorium, a single person starts to clap. It's Sarah Chun. She's standing now, applauding slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving Dwayne's face. The sound echoes through the hall like gunshots. For 5 seconds, she's alone. Then Ms. Rodriguez stands. Then Mr. Washington, the only black teacher at Whitmore. Then 3 more students, then 5, then 10. The applause builds like a wave gathering strength. But it's not the polite, obligatory clapping of a school assembly. This is something deeper, something that recognizes truth when it hears it. Bradley stands frozen at his podium, watching his perfect plan crumble in real time. He'd scripted Dwayne's humiliation down to the last detail, but no one had prepared him for this possibility. That Dwayne might not just survive, but soar. In the audience, Madison Fairfield sits motionless, her usual smirk replaced by something that might be shame, or recognition, or both. Within 30 seconds, half the auditorium is on their feet. Students who have never given Dwayne a second thought are applauding. Parents who came expecting a spectacle are witnessing something entirely different. The moment when someone refuses to be diminished and, in doing so, elevates everyone around them. But it's not universal. Carson Webb sits with his arms crossed, his face a mask of resentment. Several other students remain seated, clearly uncomfortable with what they've just witnessed. The room is divided between those who recognize truth when they hear it and those who are too invested in their own superiority to acknowledge it. Headmaster Richardson approaches the microphone, his face unreadable. In 50 years of education, he's never seen anything quite like this. A debate that started as orchestrated cruelty has become something else entirely, a moment of genuine transformation. The judges have reached their decision. His voice carries across the still applauding crowd. The clapping dies down, but people remain standing, waiting. In a unanimous decision, the winner of this year's Whitmore Academy Debate Championship is Dwayne Campbell. The applause this time is thunderous, not just from the people who are already standing, but from others who are now rising, caught up in something larger than themselves. But Dwayne doesn't celebrate. Instead, he walks to the microphone one more time. "Thank you," he says simply, and somehow his quiet voice cuts through all the noise. "But I need to say something else." The crowd settles, sensing this moment isn't over. This isn't about me winning and someone else losing. This isn't about Jamaica being better than America or scholarship students being better than legacy admissions. This is about all of us being brave enough to see each other as fully human. He looks directly at Bradley, who's still standing at his podium, looking lost and smaller than anyone has ever seen him. "Bradley, you tried to humiliate me because you were afraid. Afraid that if someone like me could succeed here, it might mean that your success isn't as special as you thought. But here's what I learned. There's room for all of us to be extraordinary. My light doesn't dim yours. It just makes the whole world brighter." The room is dead quiet now, hanging on every word. "For 2 years, I let you make me smaller because I thought that would make you more comfortable. But I'm done shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never designed for me. Instead, I'm going to expand those spaces until there's room for everyone. He pauses, looking out over the faces staring back at him. And to every student of color, every scholarship kid, every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong, you do belong. Not because they let you in, but because you deserve to be here. Not because you can prove you're just like them, but because the world needs exactly who you are. In the audience, things are shifting in ways no one could have predicted. Students are looking at each other differently, seeing classmates they'd never really noticed before. Saracen catches the eye of Maria Santos, one of the few Latina students, and something passes between them. Recognition, solidarity, possibility. Even some of the students who came to watch Dwayne's destruction are reconsidering. Not all of them. Change is never universal, but enough. Enough to matter. What no one realizes yet is that 3 different students have been live streaming the debate on their social media accounts. Within hours, clips of Dwayne's speech will be circulating on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. The hashtag #BuildYourOwnClassroom will trend for 3 days. But more importantly, the speech will find its way to other schools, other students, other young people who have been waiting their entire lives to hear someone say what Dwayne just said, that their culture, their story, their very existence is not something to apologize for, but something to celebrate. As the crowd finally begins to disperse, Dwayne stands alone on the stage for a moment. He thinks about his mother, working her night shift at the hospital in Kingston, who won't know about this victory for another 6 hours. He thinks about his grandmother, who always knew this day would come even when he didn't believe it himself. But mostly, he thinks about the 13-year-old boy who walked into Whitmore Academy 3 years ago, desperate to become someone else, someone acceptable, someone small enough to fit into their predetermined spaces. That boy is gone now. In his place stands someone who knows that the greatest victory isn't becoming who they want you to be. It's becoming so fully yourself that you give everyone else permission to do the same. As students file out of the auditorium, conversations are different. Voices are different. Something has shifted in the DNA of Whitmore Academy. Something that can't be undone. Saracen approaches Dwayne as he gathers his things. That was... She starts, then stops, searching for words. That was someone telling the truth. Dwayne says simply, something we should all do more often. She nods, then surprises them both by saying, I'm tired of being the only Asian student in advanced physics. Want to help me change that? And in that moment, Dwayne realizes that his speech hasn't just won a debate. It's planted seeds. Seeds that will grow into movements, into changes, into other students finding the courage to claim their own stories. The last person to leave the auditorium is Bradley Ashworth III. He stands in the empty hall, looking up at the stage where his carefully planned humiliation became someone else's triumph. For the first time in his privileged life, Bradley is forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. That maybe, just maybe, he's been living in a very small world, and he's the one who's been diminished by it. Tomorrow, things will be different at Whitmore Academy. Not perfect. Change is never perfect, but different. And sometimes, different is the first step toward better. I need to stop here for a moment because what just happened next, that transformation you just witnessed, that's not just about Dwayne. That's about every single person who has ever felt like they had to shrink themselves to fit into spaces that weren't designed for them. If this story is moving you, if you're seeing yourself in Dwayne's journey, then please, and I mean this in the bottom of my heart, hit that subscribe button, because this story isn't over. The ripple effects of what Dwayne did in that auditorium are just beginning. And what happens next will show you how one moment of courage can change not just one life, but thousands. And for those of you who want to go deeper, who want access to the stories that reveal how transformation really happens, join our newsletter family. The link is in the description. These are the stories that don't just entertain. They equip you with the tools to write your own transformation. Are you ready for what happens next? Because what happens next will show you the true power of authentic courage and why this story is being shared in schools across America today. The video has been watched 2.3 million times. It started small, a TikTok clip that Saracen posted with shaking hands a night after the debate. Just 2 minutes of Dwayne's speech, the part where he talks about building lemon trees and employing half the neighborhood. She captioned it simply, "This is what courage sounds like." By morning, it had 50,000 views. By the end of the week, news outlets were calling. By the end of the month, Dwayne Campbell's name was being mentioned in the same breath as young activists who had changed the world. But the real transformation wasn't happening in the viral metrics. It was happening in places no camera could capture. At Whitmore Academy, the shift was subtle but undeniable. The culture of casual cruelty that had thrived for generations began to crack. Not overnight. Cultures don't change overnight, but steadily, like ice melting in spring. Sarah Chin started the Voices Club, a space for students of color to share their stories without having to educate or justify their experiences to anyone else. The first meeting had 3 attendees. By the end of the semester, they had to move to a larger room. Maria Santos, the quiet girl who'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible, ran for student body president and won, becoming the first Latina to hold a position in Whitmore's history. Even some of the students who had participated in Dwayne's harassment began to change. Not all of them. Some people are too invested in their own superiority to grow. But enough. Jessica Walsh, who had once left fake vacation brochures on his desk, publicly apologized during a school assembly and started tutoring underprivileged kids on weekends. But the ripples spread far beyond Whitmore's Gothic walls. In Birmingham, Alabama, a 17-year-old black girl named Keisha watched Dwayne's speech on her phone during lunch period. She'd been accepted to a prestigious summer program, but was terrified to go, convinced she didn't belong. That afternoon, she confirmed her acceptance. In Los Angeles, a Mexican-American boy named Miguel stopped trying to hide his accent in AP classes. When his teacher asked him to speak more clearly, he responded, "I am speaking clearly. This is how my family speaks truth." In Chicago, a first-generation college student from Somalia printed out excerpts from Dwayne's speech and hung them on her dorm room wall. When her roommate asked about them, she said, "That's my reminder that I don't have to shrink myself to make other people comfortable." Perhaps most surprisingly, the speech reached people who looked nothing like Dwayne but recognized themselves in his story anyway. Emma Patterson, a white girl from rural Arkansas who felt like an outsider at her elite East Coast college because of her accent and background, found strength in Dwayne's words about cultural identity being more than where you come from. It's what you create when everything else is stripped away. David Kim, a second-generation Korean American who'd been pressured by his family to become a doctor despite his passion for art, finally had the courage to switch majors after hearing Dwayne talk about building your own classroom. The video reached educators too. Dr. Patricia Williams, a black educator at Harvard's Graduate School of Education, used clips from Dwayne's speech in her course on culturally responsive pedagogy. Her students, future teachers and administrators, would carry those lessons into classrooms across America. Whitmore Academy itself was forced to reckon with its own culture. The administration, faced with unprecedented scrutiny and a viral video that made their school look like a bastion of privileged cruelty, implemented new diversity and inclusion programs. Not because they suddenly developed moral clarity, but because 2.3 million views and national media attention have a way of focusing institutional minds. But transformation is never free, and Dwayne paid a price for his courage. Some students at Whitmore never forgave him for disrupting their comfortable hierarchy. He faced subtle retaliation, group projects where he was mysteriously excluded, parties he wasn't invited to, a social exile that was more sophisticated but no less cruel than the overt bullying he'd endured before. The difference was that now, he wasn't alone. Sarah, Maria, and a growing coalition of students who had found their voices because of his example surrounded him with solidarity he'd never experienced before. More importantly, Dwayne had found something that no amount of social rejection could touch, an unshakable sense of his own worth. 3 months after the debate, Dwayne sat in his dorm room with tears streaming down his face as his grandmother's voice crackled through the phone. "Grandmama, did you see it? The video?" "Baby." Her laugh was like sunshine through storm clouds. "The whole parish has seen it. Mrs. Morrison at the market played it for me on her phone," said her granddaughter in New York sent it to her. "I was scared, Grandmama. When I walked onto that stage, I was terrified." "Of course you were scared, child. You think courage means you're not afraid? Courage means you're afraid, and you do the right thing anyway." There was a pause. Then her voice grew softer, more serious. "Dwayne, do you know what you did? You didn't just win a debate. You showed the world that a boy from Trenchtown can stand in any room, speak any truth, and make the whole world listen. You broke a chain that's been holding our people down for generations." When the acceptance letter from Harvard arrived, full scholarship, early admission, Dwayne wasn't surprised. Not because he expected it, but because he finally understood something fundamental. He was worthy of any opportunity he was brave enough to pursue. The letter referenced his exceptional demonstration of leadership and authentic voice in the face of adversity. But Dwayne knew it was more than that. Harvard wasn't just accepting a student with good grades and an inspiring story. They were accepting someone who had proven he could transform any space he entered. At Whitmore's graduation ceremony, Dwayne was chosen as a student speaker, a decision that would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. Standing at the same podium where he'd once been mocked, looking out at the same audience that had once seen him as entertainment, he spoke about bridges. "We're not here to burn bridges or build walls," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet power that had mesmerized the debate hall. "We're here to build bridges strong enough to carry everyone who comes after us." In the audience, Bradley Ashworth III, who had spent the past year in therapy, tried to understand how he'd become the person who could orchestrate such cruelty, wiped tears from his eyes. He'd never expected to feel proud of someone he'd tried to destroy. But transformation is full of surprises. Today, 5 years later, the Campbell effect is studied in education programs across the country. It refers to what happens when institutions create space for authentic voices instead of demanding assimilation. When students are encouraged to bring their whole selves to learning instead of leaving parts of their identity at the door. Dwayne himself is finishing law school at Harvard, specializing in education policy and civil rights. But he's not trying to escape his past or forget where he came from. Instead, he carries Jamaica with him everywhere, in his voice, his values, his vision of what the world could be. Last month, he received a letter from a 13-year-old girl in Detroit named Aisha. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Campbell, I watched your speech and it made me cry. But good crying, you know? I start a new school next week where I'll be the only black girl in my grade. I was going to try to talk like the other kids so they wouldn't make fun of me. But after watching you, I decided I'm going to talk like my family talks, like my grandmother talks. If they don't like it, that's their problem, not mine. Thank you for showing me that I don't have to be smaller to make other people comfortable." Here's what that 13-year-old understands, what Dwayne learned on that debate stage, and what every person who's ever felt like an outsider needs to know. Your difference isn't a deficit. Your story isn't a disadvantage. Your culture isn't a costume you put on for special occasions. It's the very foundation of your strength. The world doesn't need another copy of what already exists. It needs the original version of you, with your accent, your perspective, your grandmother's wisdom, your ancestors' resilience, your completely unique way of seeing and solving and building. When Dwayne walked onto that debate stage 3 years ago, he wasn't just representing himself. He was representing every person who has ever been told they don't belong, every kid who has ever been mocked for being different, every student who has ever felt like they had to choose between authenticity and acceptance. And what he proved, what his courage continues to prove every day, is that you don't have to choose. You can be authentically, unapologetically yourself and still claim every space, every opportunity, every dream that calls to your heart. But here's the thing about courage. It's contagious. Dwayne's moment of bravery gave Sarah Chin permission to start the Voices Club. Sarah's courage gave Maria Santos the strength to run for president. Maria's victory inspired Keisha in Birmingham, and Miguel in Los Angeles, and David in Boston. One moment of authentic courage creates ripples that spread across oceans and through generations. So the question isn't whether you have a right to take up space, to speak your truth, to build your own classroom when the world tells you that you don't deserve education. The question is, what are you going to do with that right? Because somewhere there's a 13-year-old kid who needs to see your courage, who needs to hear your voice, who needs to know that people like them can stand in any room, speak any truth, and make the whole world listen. Your moment is coming. Maybe it's tomorrow. Maybe it's today. Maybe it's right now. When it arrives, remember Dwayne Campbell. Remember that boy from Jamaica who walked into a room full of people who expected him to fail and instead gave them a master class in what it means to be human. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Remember that your story, your real, authentic, unfiltered story, is the most powerful thing you possess. And remember that when they throw stones at you, you build a castle. The video is still online, still inspiring, still creating ripples in places Dwayne will never know about, in hearts he'll never meet, in futures he'll never see but help make possible. 2.3 million views and counting. But the real number, the one that matters, is infinite, because courage, once released into the world, never stops expanding. And it all started with a 17-year-old boy who decided to stop apologizing for being exactly who he was meant to be. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Dwayne's journey, if you felt the power of that moment when he finally claimed his truth, then I need you to do something for me. I need you to subscribe to this channel. Not just because it's free, not just because it helps the algorithm, but because stories like this one save lives. Somewhere right now, there's a kid sitting alone at lunch, convinced they don't belong, There's a teenager trying to erase their accent, their culture, their very identity to fit in. There's a young person who needs to hear what you just heard, that their difference is their superpower, that their story is their strength. But they'll only hear it if you help these stories reach them. Every subscription, every share, every comment creates ripples. You become part of the transformation. And if you want to go deeper, if you want access to the stories that reveal the real mechanics of courage, the behind-the-scenes moments of transformation that I can't always share publicly, join our newsletter family. The link is in the description. This isn't just content, it's community. It's a place where your story matters, where your voice counts, where your courage can inspire others. Because here's the truth. You're not just watching Dwayne's story. You're writing your own. The question is, what kind of story will it be? Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in the power of authentic courage. And thank you for being part of the ripple effect that's still spreading across the world. Until next time, remember, when they throw stones at you, build a castle.